Some stories, you hear them, and they just don't make sense. They defy logic, rattle your bones. My story? It's one of those. I died for 2 hours, saw something no living soul should ever witness. And what I saw changed everything. My days were usually filled with dust, echoes of other people's lives, the silent hum of an empty house. I was a housekeeper, you see, for a wealthy family in a quiet suburb just outside Phoenix. Every morning, the desert sun would bake the asphalt. And I'd pull into their long, winding driveway. The air conditioning inside always hit me first. A cool, almost sterile blast against the dry heat still clinging to my skin. I'd smell the faint lemon polish, the expensive potpourri, the lingering scent of their gourmet breakfast. My hands knew the weight of every silver tray, the texture of every silk curtain. It was a good, honest job. Hard work, but it paid the bills, kept a roof over my head. My life was simple, predictable, but deep down a quiet unease sometimes settled in my chest, a feeling I was just going through the motions, missing something vital. Then the small things started. A clock, always meticulously set, suddenly off by an hour. Not just once, twice. I blamed the power grid, a glitch. Anything but what my gut whispered. One afternoon, I felt a distinct chill, a cold spot in the hallway. Even though the AC was off, the hairs on my arms stood up. I shook it off. Just an old house settling. That's what I told myself. But the feeling of being watched, a light pressure on my shoulders, grew stronger. It was a prickle at the back of my neck, even in broad daylight. It was a Tuesday. The air was thick and heavy, like breathing through a wet sponge. I was scrubbing the kitchen floor, the scent of industrial cleaner sharp in my nostrils, when a sudden, crushing weight pressed down on my chest. It wasn't just heavy. It felt like an invisible vice, squeezing the breath right out of me. My ears started ringing, a high-pitched whine that drowned out the hum of the refrigerator. The tile floor, usually cool and firm beneath my knees, suddenly felt spongy, unstable. My vision blurred. Spots danced before my eyes. I tried to call out, but no sound came, just a desperate, ragged gasp. I fell. Hard. The cold linoleum rushed up to meet me. My head hit the floor with a dull thud. The edges of the room began to fray. The bright kitchen lights stretched, then vanished, replaced by a swirling gray. The ringing in my ears faded, morphing into a profound silence. But it wasn't empty silence. It sounded like something, like a vast, ancient canyon, echoing with unspeakable things. Time, which had just been a frantic sprint, now stretched, elastic, endless. I wasn't falling. Not exactly. More like drifting, without a body, without a breath. Just me. A consciousness floating. If this part reached you, give it a like right now to keep this story going. The air around me grew impossibly heavy, thick and viscous, like moving through cold molasses. A faint, acrid smell began to seep in. Not quite smoke, not quite sulfur, but something deeply wrong. It clung to me. The light was gone, replaced by a dim, reddish glow that pulsed, almost like a dying ember. And the sound, it wasn't a roar, not a scream, but a low, guttural murmur. 1,000 voices, all whispering, all suffering. The temperature dropped. A bone-deep cold that didn't just touch my skin, but seemed to chill my very essence. I had no body, but I felt the chill. I felt the pressure. I felt an urgency, a pull, a sickening downward draw. Then I saw them. Not clearly at first, just shapes in the gleam. People, so many people, their faces etched with a sorrow I'd never imagined. I saw a brilliant artist, her hands, once so skilled, now trembling with an unbearable regret. She chased fame, not beauty. Her art became an idol. I saw a beloved communicator, a voice once heard by millions. His words, once inspiring, now just a hollow echo. He'd loved the applause more than the truth. His pride, a heavy cloak. If you understand the danger of pride, comment right now. The pride blinds. I saw a confident leader, once revered by many. His vision, once so clear, now distorted by self-deception. He'd built an empire on promises, not principles. He'd twisted the truth for power. And then, through the dim reddish haze, I saw him. It was unmistakable, a figure I recognized instantly, though I'd only ever seen him on television. A highly respected evangelical pastor. A man whose sermons had once filled auditoriums, whose books lined shelves in Christian homes across the country. He was here, in this place. The shock was a physical blow, even without a body. How could this be? This man, an archetype of faith, a beacon of hope for so many? The cold, heavy air seemed to press down even harder. A terrible question formed in my mind. What could possibly have brought him to a place like this? The cold, heavy air seemed to press down even harder. A terrible question formed in my mind. What could possibly have brought him to a place like this? This man, whose voice had comforted so many, whose teachings I'd heard snippets of myself on the radio while cleaning. My disbelief was a raw, bitter taste in my mouth. It defied everything I thought I knew about faith, about judgment. I felt a chill that went beyond the bone-deep cold of this place, a spiritual shiver of utter confusion. How could a life dedicated to what seemed like good end up here? My mind raced, trying to reconcile the public image with this terrifying reality. Then the air shifted, not with a sound, but with an immense, crushing pressure. It wasn't a being I could see, not with eyes anyway. It was an oppressive shadow. A cold certainty that permeated the very air around me, heavier than any physical weight. Its presence was felt, not seen, a suffocating blanket on the soul that seemed to reveal every hidden thought, every secret motive. It was as if the gloom itself solidified, becoming a silent, judging entity. The low murmur of suffering voices around me seemed to grow louder, more desperate, as this shadow expanded. It felt like standing beneath a mountain of ice, while every flicker of warmth within me was systematically extinguished. A thought, not spoken, but deeply impressed upon my consciousness, offered a way out. "Only confess your true intent," it whispered. A voice without sound. "Admit your hidden desires, and your burden will lift instantly." It felt like a trap, a lure. My spiritual form felt a sudden, intense fear. A cold sweat, though I had no body, broke out across me. I wanted to resist, to argue my own good intentions, to justify my past actions. I wanted to prove my worthiness, to show that my life, though simple, had been good. Then the questions came, not as words in the air, but as piercing thoughts that burrowed deep. They weren't directed just at the pastor, but at everyone, at me. Did you truly serve with a pure heart? Or merely seek applause and the adoration of men? The thought pressed, colder than any winter wind. It cut through the dim haze, slicing through my own carefully constructed self-image. I thought of the pastor, standing there, his face a mask of profound grief. What kind of applause had he sought? What hidden desires had driven him? Another question followed, sharper still. Was your love for the message or for the power and prestige it granted you over others? This one resonated with a horrifying clarity. It wasn't just about the grand stages, the television cameras. It was about influence, control. Even in my small life, had I ever sought to control a conversation, to subtly guide an outcome for my own benefit? I thought of the wealthy family I worked for, of my quiet judgments of their spending habits, their sometimes frivolous lives. Was there a subtle pride in my own humility? A self-righteousness I never acknowledged? If you understand the danger of pride, comment right now. The pride blinds, the oppressive shadow intensified, and its invisible gaze turned fully upon me. It was no longer just about the pastor or the others. It was about me. My heart, or what felt like my heart, began to pound. I had always considered myself a good person, a hard worker, honest. But these questions, they weren't about actions. They were about the why, the intent. The hidden corners of my soul I rarely dared to examine. The silent hum of my predictable life. The one I thought was just going through the motions, now felt like a desperate avoidance. I had convinced myself that my life was simple, uncomplicated by ambition or grand schemes. But was that true? Or was it a quiet form of self-deception? A way to avoid the messy, challenging work of truly living with purpose? I remembered the quiet unease I felt. The sense of missing something vital. It wasn't just a lack of excitement, it was a lack of awakening, a lack of genuine depth. I had carefully tidied my inner life, just as I tidied the houses of others, sweeping inconvenient truths under the rug of routine. This place, this cold, heavy darkness, was forcing me to see. It was forcing an awakening I had never sought. It hurt, but it was also undeniably true. If you believe that consciousness continues, write in the comments, I believe. I had always thought myself humble, content with my lot. But in that moment, under the crushing weight of the shadow's gaze, a different truth emerged. My quiet contentment was often a cover for a subtle judgment of others, a secret pride in my own lack of worldly ambition. I saw how I had used my simple life as a shield, believing myself above the temptations of the rich, the powerful, the famous. Yet I had judged them, silently, constantly. And in that judgment there was a hidden desire for something more, a subtle envy, a self-righteousness that now felt like a bitter ash in my mouth. It was a mirror, reflecting back a part of me I had meticulously kept hidden. My quiet contentment was a carefully constructed facade, a way to avoid the demanding work of true compassion, true humility. I had built a small kingdom of self-righteousness within my own mind, judging the wealthy, judging the powerful, all while believing myself superior in my simplicity. The bitter ash of that realization coated my spiritual tongue. My own hidden desires, the subtle cravings for recognition, for being right, for feeling better than others, they were laid bare. The oppressive shadow, that cold certainty, seemed to nod without moving. It wasn't just observing anymore, it was confirming. Every excuse I had ever made, every justification, crumbled around me like dry dust. A profound, aching loneliness settled in, heavier than any physical weight. It was the loneliness of seeing myself, truly seeing, stripped of every comforting illusion. I thought I was good. I believed I was good. But goodness, I now understood, wasn't just about what you didn't do wrong. It was about the heart's intent. And my heart, in its quiet corners, held so much more shadow than I ever admitted. The low, suffering murmur of the countless voices around me felt like a chorus of my own hidden failings. If this cut to your core, if you've ever felt this stark self-realization, comment now, abre meus olhos. Then a shift. The air, still heavy, began to hum with a different kind of energy. Not the crushing cold of the shadow, but a warmth that started far off. A gentle golden light, barely perceptible at first, like the first rays of dawn breaking through a dense fog. The acrid smell, the one that clung to me, seemed to thin just a fraction. The low murmuring of the suffering voices didn't stop, but something else, something pure, began to layer over it. It wasn't a roar, not an explosion. It was a presence. A vastness that felt both intimately close and infinitely distant. A voice, not from the shadow, but from the warmth, resonated through me. It wasn't a sound heard with ears, but a truth that vibrated through my very essence. It was clear, unmistakable. You are seen, fully known in all your hiding. The words were like a gentle hand, yet they carried the weight of the universe. They didn't condemn, but they didn't excuse. My spiritual form trembled. I had tried so hard to hide even from myself. But there was no hiding here. The voice continued, soft but firm, cutting through every last shred of my self-deception. True worth is found not in seeking praise, but in seeking truth. My mind flashed back to the pastor, to his public image, his sermons, his vast audience. Had he, too, sought praise more than truth? Had I, in my own small way, done the same? The golden light intensified, not blinding, but illuminating. It laid bare the intricate patterns of my own heart, the subtle ways I had twisted my simple life into a source of quiet pride. Another phrase from that vast, compassionate voice settled into my being. Awakening begins when masks fall and grace is embraced. Awakening. The word echoed through the dim, reddish haze, cutting through the murmurs, silencing the accusations of the shadow for a brief, shattering moment. It wasn't a promise of easy escape. It was an invitation to step into the painful clarity, to drop the mask of the good housekeeper, the humble servant, and face the truth of who I was. If you value raw stories like this, stories without pretense, subscribe now to Testimonies of Faith. In that instant, I understood. The judgment wasn't a decree of eternal torment, not yet. It was a showing of self, a mirror held up, not by an accuser, but by a perfect, unwavering light. I saw the pastor, his face still etched with profound grief, but now I understood his grief. It was the grief of seeing himself utterly, truthfully. The weight of the verdict wasn't something external. It was the crushing burden of my own self-deception, finally recognized. The clarity was a sharp, piercing pain, but beneath it, a profound sense of liberation began to stir. My carefully constructed world shattered, and in its place, a raw, terrifying, beautiful truth began to bloom. I wasn't good enough, and that in itself was the start of something new. My carefully constructed world shattered, and in its place, a raw, terrifying, beautiful truth began to bloom. I wasn't good enough, and that in itself was the start of something new. The crushing weight of my own self-deception, once a suffocating blanket, now felt like shards of ice, sharp and cold, melting away. The golden light, still gentle, seemed to cradle me in its vastness. I felt a pulling, not downward this time, but upward, a soft, insistent tug. The low murmur of suffering voices, though still distant, began to recede, fading into the background like a forgotten song. A new sensation began to prickle at the edges of my non-existent form. A faint warmth, not the comforting warmth of the golden light, but something physical. It started at what felt like my fingertips, then spread. A dull ache, a throbbing pulse. It was pain. And with it, the first whisper of a sound that wasn't the voice or the murmurs. A distant, rhythmic hum. The hum of a refrigerator. My senses, which had been stretched and distorted in that other place, now began to collapse back inward, focusing. The reddish haze thinned, replaced by a gray, then a blurry white. Tiny specks of light, like dust motes dancing in a sunbeam, began to appear. They shimmered, coalesced, slowly forming into the familiar, harsh glare of the kitchen lights. I felt a jolt, a sudden, jarring impact, as if my consciousness had been slammed back into a container too small for it. The cold linoleum floor, which had rushed up to meet me, was now pressed against my cheek. It was hard, unforgiving, and so very, very cold. My body, it was back. A gasp tore through my throat, ragged and desperate. My lungs burned, demanding air. I inhaled deeply, the sharp industrial scent of cleaner flooding my nostrils, a stark contrast to the acrid smell of the place I'd just left. My ears were ringing again, but this time it was the high-pitched whine that had preceded my fall. The world spun. My head throbbed where it had hit the floor. Every muscle in my body screamed in protest. I lay there, gasping, eyes squeezed shut, trying to reconcile the vast, terrifying reality I'd just witnessed with the mundane reality of the kitchen floor. If you believe that consciousness continues, write in the comments, I believe. The weight on my chest, the invisible vice, was gone, but something else remained, a profound heaviness in my spirit. The memory of the shadow's gaze, the pastor's grief, the clarity of the voice, it was all still there, etched into my very being. It wasn't a dream. It was too vivid, too real, too painful. I slowly opened my eyes. The kitchen was exactly as I'd left it. The half-scrubbed floor, the bucket of soapy water, the sponge still clutched in my hand. It was all so normal. Too normal. But I wasn't normal. The quiet unease I used to feel, the sense of just going through the motions, now felt like a gaping wound. I had seen the hidden corners. I had seen the truth. The awakening had come, not as a gentle dawn, but as a brutal, necessary earthquake. I tried to push myself up, my arms trembling, muscles screaming. It felt like I was moving through thick mud, every movement an immense effort. My throat was dry, my tongue heavy. I needed water. But more than that, I needed to understand. How long had I been gone? The clock on the wall, the one that had been off before, now seemed to mock me. It read 2:15 p.m. I remembered falling around noon. 2 hours. 2 hours lost to this world, spent in another. The realization sent a fresh wave of cold sweat through me. 2 hours. Dead. And then back. It was impossible. Yet here I was, breathing, hurting, and seeing everything with new, terrifying eyes. The lemon polish, the expensive potpourri, the gourmet breakfast remnants. They no longer smelled like comfort. They smelled like the very idols I had seen people clinging to in that other place. The air conditioning, usually a welcome blast, now felt sterile, almost artificial. It wasn't the bone-deep cold of the shadow, but it lacked the warmth of the golden light. I pulled myself to a sitting position, leaning against the cool, smooth cabinet. My head still swam. The experience had been so vast, so overwhelming, yet so intimately personal. I saw the housekeeper's life I had been living. The quiet pride, the subtle judgments, the self-deception. It was all laid bare. And now I had to live with it. I had to live through it. If this part has reached you, give a like right now to help this story reach more people. The hum of the refrigerator, the distant traffic sounds from the street outside, they were just noise before. Now they felt like a thin veil over a deeper reality, a reality I had glimpsed. The kind of reality that makes you question everything you thought you knew. My heart, still pounding a frantic rhythm, hammered a new beat. Awakening. This wasn't just about the pastor or the others. This was about me, about what I would do now that I had seen. The clarity, though painful, was also a desperate call to action. I had been given a second chance, a terrifying, beautiful, utterly undeserved second chance. That terrifying, beautiful, utterly undeserved second chance didn't just fade like a dream. It clung to me, a cold weight and a warm fire, all at once. The world looked the same, but it felt entirely new. Every dust mote dancing in the sunbeam, every whisper of the AC, carried a deeper meaning. My routine, the very fabric of my days, began to unravel and reweave itself. I still woke with the desert sun, still drove the long driveway, still polished the silver. But the why had shifted. I no longer just went through the motions. Each stroke of the cloth, each polished surface, became a silent question. Was I doing this for show, or for a genuine desire to serve? The faint linen polish, once just a smell, now reminded me of the facades we build, the superficial layers we apply. I started cleaning with a different kind of presence, a quiet reverence instead of just efficiency. My hands, which knew the weight of every silver tray, now felt the weight of every choice. I used to sweep inconvenient truths under the rug of routine, just as I swept dust from beneath the furniture. No, I sought out those hidden corners, not just in the houses I cleaned, but within myself. My quiet judgments of the wealthy family, their spending habits, their sometimes frivolous lives, no longer felt like a subtle victory. They felt like a burden. I saw my own pride reflected in their excesses, a mirror showing me how easily I could have fallen into the same traps had my circumstances been different. The awakening had cracked open my carefully constructed humility. This shift wasn't easy. It was a daily battle. I started looking at the things I owned, the things I consumed. Did they truly serve me? Or were they just distractions, filling a void I was now forced to confront? Less mindless scrolling, more time sitting in silence. Less sugary comfort food, more simple, nourishing meals. It wasn't about deprivation. It was about intentionality, about making choices that honored the truth I had glimpsed. The subtle cravings for recognition, for feeling right, for being better than others, still surfaced. But now, I saw them, I could name them, and that, in itself, was a small victory. My interactions with people changed too. I used to be guarded, polite but distant. Now, I found myself looking into the eyes of the grocery store clerk, the gas station attendant, my elderly neighbor, with a new kind of compassion, a raw, vulnerable empathy. I stopped being so quick to mentally criticize, to form snap judgments. Instead, I tried to imagine their burdens, their hidden struggles. It was harder, messier work than just keeping to myself, but it felt real. It felt like living. I even started volunteering at a local shelter, something I'd always meant to do, but had always found an excuse to postpone. My hands, once only familiar with dust and polish, now learned the texture of rough blankets, the weight of a warm meal. And my spiritual life, it became everything. Not a checklist, not a performance, but a deep, aching hunger. I devoured old books, not just for comfort, but for challenging truth. I sought out a small, unassuming church, not for the grand sermons or the applause, but for the quiet fellowship, the shared journey. My devotion wasn't about proving anything anymore. It was about desperate seeking, about admitting I wasn't good enough, and finding grace in that raw honesty. The sense of missing something vital, that quiet unease, was replaced by a profound, if sometimes painful, sense of connection. If you need to break free from deception, write in the comments, "Deliver me from deception." This awakening was ongoing, a constant process of shedding old skin, of learning to walk in a new light. The awakening wasn't a one-time event. No, it was the beginning of a relentless, beautiful process. Every morning, the desert sun still bakes the asphalt, but now it feels like a new invitation, an invitation to live differently, to shed the quiet pride, to embrace the messy truth. I've shared my story, not to scare you, but because some truths are too vital to keep hidden. This journey, This glimpse behind the veil forced me to ask uncomfortable questions. Questions I still ask myself every single day. What about you? Have you felt that quiet unease? That sense of just going through the motions? Do you too sometimes sweep inconvenient truths under the rug of routine, believing your own carefully constructed version of good? It's easy to judge others, isn't it? To point fingers at the pastors or the leaders while our own hidden corners remain unexamined? If this has cut to your core, if you're ready to face your own truth, comment right now, "I want the truth." This isn't about perfection. It's about honesty, about acknowledging the shadows within, about choosing to walk in a different light, even when it's painful. If that decision resonates with your spirit, if you feel that call to change, let these words be yours. Jesus, I choose you. I choose the truth. And I surrender my hidden pride. Say it. Feel it. Let it sink in. Tomorrow morning when the sun rises, don't let this just be another story. Take one step. Read a passage from a spiritual text that challenges your comfort. Change one small attitude about someone you usually judge. Renounce one subtle way you seek approval from others. And reach out to one person, genuinely, without agenda. This awakening is available to us all if we dare to look. If this story has moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear this message of hope and truth. And if you want to keep exploring these raw, unvarnished testimonies of faith, join me again next time on Testimonies of Faith. More stories wait. More truths wait to be uncovered.